All eyes are on the Democratic Alliance this weekend as they hold their federal congress to elect new leaders for the party. The opposition party will elect 6 positions into their leadership structure. This moment is seen as an important one for the opposition, as whoever is elected as its leader will drive the party into the 2024 general elections. Current leader John Steenhuisen hopes to retain his position, while former Joburg Mayor Dr. Mpho Phalatse will contest this position. Helen Zille will stand to retain her position as a Federal Council chairperson uncontested. There was also the somewhat peculiar emergence of member Lungile Penyane, who was initially set to contest all 6 positions but later withdrew from running for federal leader, finance and Federal Council chairperson, but remained as a challenger for 3 other positions. But what does this moment mean for the DA, and who would be the best candidate to lead the party in the 2024 elections? Well, political analyst Professor Sethulego Matebesi weighs in. Prof, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for joining us this morning. You know, the Democratic Alliance has touted this particular Congress as a game changer, right? It sees itself essentially as a government in waiting. And I want to know from you, should we be taking this, seriously as a real, reality, or is it, more of the political posturing that we've come to know from the DA?
Hi, good morning in Tokoza and good morning to your viewers. We yet once again have, as you've correctly indicated, it is a key moment in the life, the evolution of the Democratic Alliance. But it's also a key moment for opposition party. And I want to start off just to say, before I answer your question, to say under the leadership, and people may differ with me on this one, but under the leadership of Mmusi Maimane, the entire opposition, not only the Democratic Alliance, was at its strongest. And somewhere along the line, since his departure, I strongly believe that the opposition politics has somehow disintegrated. But whether the Democratic Alliance will grab this opportunity to move away from this identity politics and race-based politics, that is something that I strongly believe that it's still going to haunt them. And this particular conference will set a tone of how the Democratic Alliance is going to navigate not only 2024 but the next 10 years in terms of playing opposition politics in South Africa. But for me, for them to say they are a government in waiting, it's definitely not going to happen in 2024 because they are at 25%. What will happen that will significantly now increase or actually push voters to the Democratic Alliance? I don't think that over the next couple of months that's going to happen.
All right, well, talking about those factors, right, that are feeding into this narrative that the DA is giving us is, of course, the issue around voter turnout. The prediction is that the more South African voters come out to vote, there is a strong likelihood that we'll see a significant electoral decline for the ANC and a major bump up for parties like the DA and the Economic Freedom Fighters as the 3rd largest party in the country. However, if we continue along this trend of the poor voter turnout that we've been seeing, we aren't going to see the kinds of changes that have been predicted insofar as a potential coalition government of sorts. What are your thoughts on that? Because, the DA seems to be running on this narrative quite strongly. They, of course, have been running several internal polls that are acting as a sort of evidence for this.
Yes, if you look at internationally, voter turnout had a huge impact on the ultimate electoral outcome, and perhaps that's where the Democratic Alliance starts. But remember, I've also seen, I'm connecting from my hometown, Fort Smith, which is about 130 km from Bloemfontein, and over the weekend I've already noticed that some, information about persuading South Africans to register for next year's election. That is a good start from the IEC. But remember also, people registering to vote does not necessarily mean on the day of the election they will eventually go. Because of what is happening in our politics, people are so disillusioned with the body politics or the general landscape of politics in South Africa. And here you've got a opposition party, which I strongly believe that in terms of governance, no one can blame the Democratic Alliance if you look at what they've been doing in Cape Town. And elsewhere where they govern. No one can but fact of the matter is South Africans are still battling to identify with the Democratic Alliance based on what I've already mentioned, race-based issues, identity, politics. But the DA has played a significant role. And the issue of voter turnout, it's a huge battle, not only for the Independent Electoral Commission. Political parties also has a responsibility. And I strongly believe that some civil society organizations also has a role to play. And not only motivate people to register, but eventually to exercise their democratic alliance. But I will be very cautious to now align a high voter turnout with, perhaps a vote of confidence for the opposition, because that can also go the way of the African National Congress. I strongly believe, actually, that the ANC has been a victim of low voter turnout. So the moment if you've got a higher voter turnout, and if you look at what has been happening throughout South Africa, is that people still identify with the ANC, although predictions does point that for the very first time, the ANC might just get below 50%. But I can't see that any opposition party will get an outright majority. And what we have been exposed to in terms of local governance with these coalition governments, one just shudder to think what will happen at national.
All right, so we both agree that there has been, a semblance of electoral decline for the African National Congress. And we can both agree that perhaps, no, we won't see an outright majority for some of the parties that are sitting in the opposition benches. What does that mean then for 2024? Because that, for a lot of analysts, points to a strong indication towards the coalition government. We know that there are reports that the DA has been in conversation with the ANC, talking about a potential coalition partnership in the event of such an outcome. What are your thoughts on how the DA would approach or handle talks and engagements of that nature? We've already been seeing examples of it playing out at a local government level to the detriment of residents of Tshwane for a long time, because they were without a mayor for several weeks. And so we've seen how that hasn't necessarily worked in favor of voters. But your thoughts on this idea of a coalition government and the DA approaching parties like the ANC to start engaging on that subject matter?
Yeah, no, well, I just wanted to also come in. I do agree with many commentators. There will perhaps be a coalition government, but I think the ANC will be in a better position, because if they are high up, 45% upwards, they will be in a stronger position to negotiate. And that's where the trouble starts. The moment the DA, which we all know ideologically, the DA is completely different to the ANC. What message will they be sending to their members? Because you can sit now and follow the DA's elective conference throughout the day. You will hear what their narrative will be and what is their target market in terms of policies and all that. So the question is yet once again, aren't we going to see what we've been experiencing at local government level if a DA and for instance, like the EFF and the ANC, those two into coalition? And we all know the ideological differences there, but fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, we know this is a possibility, and it might also just be good. Let us also not just look at the negative side. Maybe this will be good for the country, where there is slightly undue pressure from within a governance side, within the setup of governance institutions and structures in this country, where in the past the African National Congress has been left on its own. It might just be good for South Africa.
Well, Prof, very quickly before we let you go, you've been at pains to really stress this issue of race-based politics and how it's, likely to affect the performance of the Democratic Alliance coming out of this particular Congress. The idea of John Steenhuisen being re-elected as federal leader gives a sense of, a little bit of, rinse and repeat, much of the same, very little change. The idea of Dr. Mpho emerging as a federal leader, what sense would that create amongst constituencies, voter bases that have not yet been able to relate or to identify with the Democratic Alliance? Would that element be enough to push the needle in a more positive direction for the Democratic Alliance, if I may put it that way?
No, I also predict that John Steenhuisen will be the DA come tomorrow morning of the Democratic Alliance, but that does not necessarily mean that the DA is on the wrong path. I equate John Steenhuisen with an Athol Trollip, someone, even if he was white, but he represented such an ideology which persuaded many black South Africans to vote for the Democratic Alliance. And even if Mpho emerged victorious, I think it will still take time to convince the electorate to vote for the Democratic Alliance. They may just attract a few voters, but I don't think it will be too late for them to penetrate the South African electorate to such an extent that they can be satisfied.
All right, well, Prof, thank you so much. We'll leave it there for now. That was a political analyst, Professor Sethulego Matebesi, helping us to further unpack this key moment for the Democratic Alliance as it holds its federal Congress.